everyone, it's Chris here from Treant Monk's Temple, and I have Alan, aka the Dungeon Coach here. And about 3 months ago, I did a video about the DC20 system, Alpha 0.4 at that point. And we are moving towards 0.6, I think,
Correct.
coming up here. So I asked Alan if he had come on to do a little bit of Q&A, and he was gracious enough to agree.
Get out of here, gracious! Now I'm excited. As soon as you said, I was like, "I will." You want to talk to me about DC20? I won't stop talking. You're gonna have to end this video, or it's gonna be a 3-hour-long video.
So if you haven't seen the video I did 3 months ago, I'll link it in the video description. And also, if you are interested in supporting DC20, I will put my affiliate link in the description as well. But I just wanted to get right started. If you're good with that, Alan.
Let's go.
Okay. So I guess the first question I have, and this one might be most of the video.
No, let's go.
But so I did that video covering 0.4. What are the biggest changes since then?
Right. So honestly, the crazy part with all these changes is like I had launched 0.4 out of a necessity. I had to release it because things were getting to a spot where I'm like, okay, I need to see if, and a lot of these other TTRPGs have launched their Kickstarters and they've launched their other things. And so I needed to launch an alpha of some kind to keep the ball rolling, to be able to make it to the Kickstarter. So I launched 0.4, fully playable, ready to go. And then now the 0.5 was able to like do a lot of those tweaks and changes that I really wanted to do, but I had to get the game out type situation. So 0.5 was a lot of quality of life improvements. Same with 0.6. So it's honestly been a lot of like rule updates and really focusing on refining the rules, whether it be the phrasing of rules to make it very clear and clean and efficient, or certain interactions and making sure that the intent of how it's supposed to feel lands and stuff. So the list of changes is one thing I found out was heavy armor was a bit too strong. So that was tuned down a little bit. I think you personally demonstrated that in the one shot.
It was good, yeah.
Yeah, it was real good, real good. So that also is going to be continue to be iterated on in 0.6 and things. And also the biggest thing in 0.5 was ancestries and the ancestry system of truly being able to build a customized ancestry. It was the ancestry system I had planned to make for D&D, and all these different ideas that I had and was going to do for that, I was able to then just like make a core part of DC20 to where you can make, instead of having a human, an elf, and a half elf with 3 separate things and 3 steps. No. There's humans, there's orcs, there's gnomes, there's elves. And if you want to be a half elf, you can take the human traits and the elf traits and mix and match them because you have 5 traits in each and all these things.
Each trait is worth like a set amount, and then you have a certain number of traits for each, ancestry, and you can switch them out as well, right? Yeah.
Right. So you have a default 5 traits that's like the classic, like this is the classic elf. And then there's also expanded traits for the elf that add a little bit of customization. I want to be an elf that's like this, or I grew up in the woods, or whatever you want to do for your elf, right? And that's true for every single ancestry. And if you want to do any sort of interesting mix, I have a campaign I'm starting next week. And I have somebody who wants to do a dwarf and giant born, right? So like a Goliath type character and a dwarf. And they kind of look like a little bit of like a stocky human because you got a dwarf that's a little shorter, a giant boy that's a little taller, and it's just a cool mix of like they wanted to have the stout stockiness and the big strongness, and they picked those 2 and made their own. So that's been really cool to be able to finally iterate that system and get it out to people to create characters with. And then the other changes as far as classes goes is which in props to you here is you very accurately called the classes that I had my eye on, and then you very, very well shined a spotlight on some of the weaknesses of the monk. The monk was a completely different monk than what the D&D monk is, with all the stances and all that other kind of stuff, and I wanted to make sure it was fun. That box was checked, but now we have to make it balanced. So the monk got updates, the scion, the ranger, and the warlord all got updates, all with some more stuff coming in 0.6. But that was a little polishes off of those classes, and that was up to this point of technical right now we're in 0.5.1, and 0.1 was just a bunch of editing, polished off stuff.
Okay. Now you're planning to do a Kickstarter at some point for this, right? Any timeline for that?
James, remember, I'm terrible with months. So June 1st. I always have to say January, February, March,
Okay.
April, May. June 1st
So about
is
4 months
for
from
sure
now.
date.
All right.
Yep. Yep.
And what do you have like a roadmap for where you want to be at which points and
Yeah.
when we
Yeah.
might actually have like a DC20 book?
I feel like this might be the first time that will have said this like in succinct order here, because just over this last little bit of last 2 weeks or so, me and my team like locked in like, okay, this is kind of what the goal is, especially with the Kickstarter on the horizon now. At least it's not months and months away. It's like, oh, 4 months, 5 months, So the goal is to keep updating the alpha constantly, constantly, constantly. And anyone who gets the alpha gets all future updates of the alpha, and that's just the early access stuff to help the project go to the Kickstarter. And then our goals for that, 0.6 is going to come with the Beastborn race, which is a very customizable race to make any sort of anthropomorphic creature that you want to backsies, where that would be, like a tiger person, a frog person, a turtle person, whatever. So the Beastborn ancestry, 3 classes in the Bard, Druid, and Warlock, all of which are 3 spellcaster classes. They are a little bit more intricate to make and really make sure that they each feel different, because I have a goal of all spellcasters feeling different. If they cast Fireball, they should be able to each cast the Fireball differently, right? So those 3 classes are huge. New spells come along with those classes. It'll sprinkle in a new spells, an attribute overhaul, and other core rule updates. And throughout this process, there's going to be a ton of just little sprinkly core rule updates that just come up on the radar of things like that. That's 0.6, and my estimate for that's going to be about 1 month from now, is when that will be done. 0.7 has an armor update, all subclasses. So there's 15 classes in the alpha right now, and there will not be 15 classes in the core game. So the alpha actually has some content that's not going to be in the full game, because there's no way I'm going to have 15 classes for the core game. But 0.7 will have 2 subclasses for all 15 classes. That's 30 subclasses, which is a lot. And you'll be able to get up to level 4 in the game at that point, and additional spells and other little rule updates. And then 0.8 is when we're getting close to the time where we might be launching into that Kickstarter territory. But that's where level 5 class features, level 6 subclass features, spellcasting overhaul, all the big stuff that updates for the spellcasting system. That's my goal, is to get that out before the Kickstarter launches. And then when the Kickstarter launches,
Kickstarter in June.
Kickstarter June 1st. And then as soon as the Kickstarter launches, anyone who backs the Kickstarter, the beta is going to be to all Kickstarter backers. And that's going to be a super easy thing. If you back it early, late, whenever, as soon as you get in there. I don't know how that's going to look. I haven't planned all that out yet. But if you back the Kickstarter, on the Kickstarter, you're going to get access to the beta and be able to play in all the updates, and all the updates the whole way through. The digital products, all of that's going to be all updated. And then the book launch, I hope for the book that will be launched.
I know you can't give me an exact date or anything.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But
Yeah.
just your a ballpark or a goal.
Within a year of the actual Kickstarter finishing. My goal is to do a Kickstarter every year. So the core rule game will be the first Kickstarter, and then the Game Master's Guide and Monster Manual will be another one, the second Kickstarter, and then it'll just be a yearly Kickstarter, hopefully in June. But my goal is to have the book printed, shipped, and finished before that, so that the next Kickstarter comes, and then we can get a little bit more efficient, to where ideally in the future the Kickstarters would come, and then the books would be able to print out, like 3 or 4 months after that, and have a quicker turnaround. I purposely want this to be longer for the beta and feedback and all that kind of stuff.
So the base book, is there going to be any magic items in there, or is that going to be something that comes with a Game Master's Guide?
So that was kind of a interesting thought to have, of like, okay, how to organize the core book, or the core what goes where, right? And the big thing of the stuff people need to run games, what goes where. So my best solution of where I think would be the cleanest way of doing this is those types of things, magic items, would be in the Game Master's Guide. Now, before people are like, oh no, but what about, I want to give people the tools to play the game with as little friction and as little work on your end as humanly possible. So alongside the Kickstarter, and easy little bundles and stretch goals and all the stuff. If the Kickstarter does crazy well with stretch goals, I plan on just throwing free stuff into the Kickstarter and just letting that fire go crazy with a bunch of free stuff. Free stuff being monsters, magic items, adventures, and all that kind of stuff to be able to run. So yes, the first Kickstarter is going to be the core rule book, but I'm fully aware that to be able to play the game, you need more than just the core rule book. And we don't have that iconic adventure modules and all these things yet, since we're such a brand new, game system. But I'm going to be releasing a completely free conversion from D&D to DC20.
Like that was going to be my next question. Is how far are you on that?
Well, that's the hard part. Is like so many things. I have a master document full of like things to do, right? And one of those very important ones is to be able to convert stuff. But I think the more important thing is to be able to get the game. Because right now there's people playing. There's hundreds of people playing, and they want to level up to level 3. They want a subclass. They want all these things. So I think my priority goal is to make sure I can open up that level cap by releasing the content that's needed to level up. And then once I can get people around like level 5, 6, 7 to where they can start playing and like even have a campaign cycle. If I can get people to like level 7 or so, you can have a full campaign within that band. And just also to clear up some stuff that people have been confused about. D&D and DC20 are a 1-to-1 as far as levels are concerned. It's the same. So if you were to run a campaign in D&D and you got to level 12, you would run a campaign and get to level 12 in DC20.
Are you also going to cap at level 20, same as D&D?
In general, yes, but the I think smooth way of handled leveling is 1 through 10 is your class leveling. So your class gets you from 1 to 10. So you're actually going to be able to play that class capstone. You're going to be able to feel what that class fantasy is all about. And then at level 11, you take a prestige path and you choose a martial, hybrid, or spellcaster prestige path. And then you get a bunch of talents and other things, and to be able to kind of customize from there and go wild, right? Because that's what that's what high level TTRPGs are all about, right? Yeah. So you can get to level 20, and then if you wanted to, you would just do it again. You could go to level 30. So it would be repeatable enough to where if you got to the end of a campaign and you're level 20, but there's like a handful of sessions, you could hit level 21. You could go 22 because the system's already set up for that. But yeah, the big picture is I want to get people able to get that level. So then I want to be able to release that guide of like, okay, here's this module. Here's how you would take this monster and turn it into this. And I would have like a side-by-side of a freaking on-keg or something and have like a D&D on-keg, DC20 on-keg. Here's how that would look and be able to, that's all I would do. And then you could really convert everything.
All right. Now, I know you're not doing this all by yourself. How many people you got working with you right now?
So the crazy part is when I first started this whole thing out, it was just me with these ideas and making Alcanner's Almanac, and Alcanner's Almanac was entirely me. I just had these ideas of rules, and then through Alcanner's Almanac, I brought in this guy named Eddie Blanton. He goes by Purius is his online name, and then he was able to like work with me on stuff, and he's really good at getting in my head and saying things better. And I like, for example, the counterspell rework in Alcanner's Almanac. I was like, here's how I want counterspell to work. It should be this. You shouldn't have to do this. You shouldn't lose your spell. All the clunkiness that's involved with the counterspell and the drama that revolves around that. I want to fix it in this way. And then he was able to say that in a coherent format. So really, it's just me and him are the ones working on DC20. That's it. So we have calls every single week, every day for a couple hours, and go back and forth on it. And then we go our separate ways, refine, come back together, have arguments, go back and forth on stuff. It's super great to have him in the trenches with me. And then I have a team of about 8 to 10 beta rule reviewers of like the mechanics of stuff. And then they kind of like, we talk about it, feedback, like this looks good, propose stuff. And it's a great team in that nothing's a bad idea, and that's the environment that I want to foster and build is like just start throwing stuff out there. I might take that idea, that's crazy, throw it out there, or that's crazy, but wait a second, this could be, and then it's a really nice environment as far as it goes of just creative people. So super love them, and then that's just the rules building side. But then behind the scenes, I have a writing director, editing director, art director, layout design director to kind of organize all the thoughts, a team of writers. But a lot of that goes into the 5e playbooks that I make every month. And then over time, that team will start to shift over to DC20, and when we start to make that supplemental content. Because another thing to kind of answer a question you said before is when the Kickstarter closes, like the day it closes, you know how it's open for a month. As soon as it closes, I'm launching DC20 magazine. This might be the first time I've said this too, but DC20 magazine is going to be a monthly supplement for exactly those things that we need of magic items and monsters and adventures and NPCs and worlds and city. Yeah. So
And will that be like automatic for Kickstarter
oh yeah.
backers?
So that's going to be one of the things as far as whether it be an add-on or stretch goal and all that kind of stuff. Because however, I'm fully excited to see how well it does. And the better it does, the more stuff everybody that is a part of it gets, right? And I'm going to throw in as much free stuff as I can. There'll be different add-ons that people can choose to get if they want or not. But that first issue of the DC20 magazine for sure is going to be a part of the Kickstarter, and it's going to be like launched along with it, to where if you want this, here's the DC20 core rules, and here's a little supplement of what you want, and here's a bunch of free stuff that's unlocked from the stretch goals. Bam, and you are just set is my goal, right? And then every month after that to have feedback from what we're missing and what kind of things we're wanting and all that kind of stuff. Also, the DC20 magazine is going to have little sneak peeks of the future Kickstarters, of the Game Master's tools, of different little resources and stuff for that. And I have my own campaign that I'm going to be launching, running, and releasing the different monsters I'm building and using, and the NPCs and the worlds and the towns and all that stuff too. So lots of stuff will be flowing out at that point.
Now, you talked about feedback. Now, I know you've gotten a lot of feedback from players, myself. I assume your team of people who do the beta reviews. So tell me, are there any things that you've learned from getting the feedback from other people that maybe something you thought was great that didn't land, or the other way around?
I think one of the things that was an interesting, I knew it would be challenging to take on, and I knew there was going to be things that pop up that would happen with the prime modifier, the concept in DC20 where you have 4 attributes in DC20. That's one thing. This is the concept, and in those 4 attributes, whichever one is your highest attribute is considered your prime attribute. So whenever you swing a sword or cast a spell, you use your prime attribute, which is just the highest of them. So it doesn't matter that, oh, I am a barbarian, therefore I have to have might, and therefore I'm a cleric, so therefore I have to have wisdom, or is that now intelligence, or is that now, so there's not these prescribed things where, like in D&D, when you build a paladin, you have to have certain points in charisma for your spell casting, and strength for your sword, or dexterity, I guess, maybe. And constitution's your health, you got to have that, and then, all these different things, right? So instead of it being these forced things that you have to do, I wanted to approach prime in a way that you could truly, if you wanted to build a paladin, what kind of paladin do I want to be? And might, agility, intelligence, or charisma are all viable options. Are you a charismatic paladin that has your oath, you get people behind you and you have this force of will to yourself to kind of get people with you and for you? Intelligence, you've studied and you know all these different things about how fighting, you know all these things about magic, you've studied your oaths and tenets and all those things. Agility, you're a quick and nimble paladin, or if might, you're just a big strong paladin, right? So all of those are viable in DC20. And with that big task of a goal, there was a lot of things that were kind of clunky in 0.4 where, okay, so if I'm a barbarian and I did might and agility, I don't care about intelligence, charisma at all. So now, how is that cool? There's just no incentive to do that. So in 0.6, there's an absolute attribute overhaul that's happening. And I think it's gotten to the game to a spot that I'm the most excited about ever, where all attributes matter across the board.
Now it would take quite a while to go over all of those, but I'll get you to go over my favorite one. Tell us about what's happening with charisma.
I was hoping you'd say charisma. Oh man. So yeah, so the 2-second version, and then I'll end with charisma, is might is where your health comes from, because basically thinking of D&D, it's constitution, strength combined is might. Might has health associated to it. Agility has like jump distance, fall damage, your armor class, being able to dodge light armor stuff with, so that's very important. Intelligence gives you bonus skills equal to your intelligence, so you get more skill points to put stuff in. And then charisma, this was the hardest one, honestly, dude. It was the hardest one to rack for months, literally, of like, how can charisma affect combat? Like what? And so there was one iteration, I'll say it here, is there was one point I was like, oh, what if when combat started, when you rolled initiative, you gained temporary health equal to your charisma, which represented your like, force of will. Yeah, yeah. But then it interacts with temporary hit points of other spells, and then it steps on the toes of, no, never mind. So what now it is, and I love that you said it's your favorite, but everybody, regardless of class, this is not a class thing. Everybody gets a number of grit points equal to your charisma, right? So the maximum you can get your charisma to is 3 at level 1.
Yeah. I should just let anyone know who doesn't know this. The average score for any attribute in DC20 is 0.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and you can have negative scores.
5, I guess.
Yeah. So
-2 to 3. Yeah.
So everyone having their charisma doesn't mean everyone will have grit. Only people with positive charisma will have grit.
At my table, when we made the 4 characters, somebody has negative grit, somebody has no grit, somebody has we have 0, 1, 2, and 3 across the board. So depending on what your charisma score is if you have grit points or not. But what you do with grit points was a very fine line that I wanted to walk, because I did not want it to turn into a mechanic that like, oh, you have to have it and it's so strong that it's a must have, and now you have, and then it robs people of choice or the illusion of choice or whatever. So I wanted it to be cool and punchy. So grit points, you can spend 1 grit point to give yourself advantage on a save, or an ally that can see or hear you advantage on a save.
That's the one I really like, because
yeah,
if it's somebody else, I can see like, hey man, you can do it, right? And and they're like, oh yeah. They get that little burst of strength. That's something that I can see being a charisma thing.
Right. Well, I had somebody, we did a little play test with it, and somebody was like, everybody was just had a goal of like trying to use a grit point in the most wild way possible, descriptive wise. And the one that gave me the most chills was, he's like, I want to use a grit point. Somebody was like trapped, like they were wedged between a literal rock and a hard place, right? And they were trying to like make a might save to get out of there to not get crushed by a boulder. And he's like, I want to give him a grit point. And I was like, what does it look like? And he goes, I don't say anything. We lock eyes. You're caught underneath the boulder. You look at me. I give you that strong nod. And he's like, it was just so cool, man. And then another unique thing that another player said during our character creation, they're like, so they have 1 grit point. And they're like, I don't really see my character like helping others that much. They're a rogue. They have this like, they don't really know anybody yet. This is the start of the group. I was like, that's fine. Like from role play wise, don't use that grit point on anyone but yourself. And then over time, I think there'll be a cool thing of when you use a grit point on an ally. What does that look like? Who do you use it on? So it's cool, and it's not overpowered. It makes sense for charisma, the force of will, whether it be yourself or others, and pushing through stuff. So charisma's in a real cool spot right now. I really love it.
Cool. All right. And have you gotten much feedback on the Ancestry system yet?
Yeah. So I did a whole Ancestry video. And the big thing, honestly, and I want to see your thoughts on this, we haven't talked about this, is the charisma system, how I purposely made it, is that right now, there's 10 ancestries. I have like 22 on my master document, but there's 10 ancestries. And each of them have 5 default traits and a couple of expanded traits. As long as you have a total of 5 points, you're good. Like I said, you can mix and match. So I don't know if it's the way I presented it in the video or whatever, but people were seemingly upset that a regular dwarf, like if I chose dwarf and only dwarf, right, that was just straight up worse than if I did dwarf plus and like I had more options to choose from and stuff like that. So the whole goal is, and I described this in the video too, is if you wanted to make a dwarf that was just a little bit more brave, and they had like, that's part of the role play of this dwarf, this is heroic dwarf. Well, halflings have a bravery feat that's worth, or bravery trait that's worth 2 points. So you could be a dwarf and just do dwarf halfling, take 2 points from the halfling, and then pick whatever 3 points worth of dwarf, and then you got your dwarf, and you can stay there 100% pure-blooded dwarf if you wanted to. But my big view of this fantasy world is that the mix and mesh and mingle of all of these different fantasy races merging and combining together, and how cool would like that dwarf, the dwarf giantborn, dwarf Goliath, how cool is that combination? A halfling elf, what would that look like? I think that's so cool, and it really gets my brain going. Even if you start thinking about like an earthborn, like an earth genasi and a dwarf, like, oh, that's so cool. So that spirit of that, I think, is what I wanted to do. But the big feedback that I got was, I mean, the system's balanced, the system's cool, it's customizable, but I was surprised how many people were like upset that dwarfs weren't like, oh, I just want to be a pure blooded dwarf and I should have like bonuses or extra. And I don't think that's, I guess, in my design space, I don't think that's a good way to handle that, because then now some people have to then lock in one. I think the default should just be you pick two. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
I would go even further than you. If it was, if I was the one designing it, I'd say, be what you want. Here's a list of traits. Pick 5 points.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a dwarf. What are the traits to me that fit
Yeah.
my concept of a dwarf?
Dwarfish, exactly.
This one does. This one does,
Yeah.
and this one does. Has 5 points. Boom, done.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You would have
that's
the
what I
custom ancestry variant rule, because there's a custom ancestry variant rule that you just choose anything.
Yeah.
So instead of just pick between two, it's pick anything you want, go for it. And then that's honestly how I would.
And then you can do like, here's an example elf. You might take these 5 things, right?
Mhm.
An example of a dwarf might take these 5 things, but
And that was my goal with the default, those default traits. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I love that. I love that. You made my day with
that's
that.
the way I'd go. All right. So this is just to answer a question that I've heard a bit. I think, I wouldn't mind hearing the answer to this myself. Okay, so in D&D you have armor class, and then in DC20 you have a physical defense and a mental defense. Then you also have a mental save. What is the difference between mental defense and mental save, and do you need both?
Gotcha. Okay, so one thing that we did in DC20, it's dynamic attack save is kind of what the big concept is. But we'll talk about spells for a second, since we're talking about mental defense. So first of all, physical defense, mental defense. Mental defense are things that protect you, are things that wouldn't matter how much armor you have on. If shield and metal and helmets and whatever you have on, right? It doesn't matter. So the things that target mental defense are psychic damage. I don't care how big of a dude you are. I'm in here, baby. It's gonna hurt, right? Holy, unholy damage, which is radiant and necrotic, right? If black swirls of fog swirl up and into your mouth, I don't care how much armor you have. Rays of light shine down on you. It doesn't matter, right? So anyway,
In the old days, we would have called that touch armor class.
That came up in sometimes of like, do we have? And I fiddled with that. And then the last mental defense damage type is sonic damage, which is thunder or sound or whatever damage, right? So those things target your mental defense. How good are you at withstanding those types of things? And those are derived from your mental attributes, intelligence, charisma. Meanwhile, the other side of things, the physical damage, which is split up into physical damage and elemental damage, like fireballs and stuff, you can still block all those physical type of things, right? So that splits up the damage, right? And that gets to the big picture of what saves versus defense. So defense, mental defense and physical defense, protect you from damage, like literal damage that targets your health and hurts you, like damage, HP, that type of stuff. And saves protect you from effects. And it is like clean down the center. Effects are for saves and damage is a defense.
So if you get hit with a fireball, that's actually against your defense, not against a saving throw.
Physical defense, 100%. Right.
Okay.
And the better physical defense you have, you're going to be able to defend against it, all that kind of stuff. Yes. Now, to play off your example, if there's a fireball, and in the spellcasting system in DC20, it uses mana instead of spell slots as the foundation. But let's say you cast a fireball and it costs 2 mana to cast a fireball, and you want to pump that fireball with a little bit of extra, and you spend an extra mana to add the burning condition to the fireball. So now that fireball's coming through the air, it's still targeting defense, but that target and all targets have to make a save to protect from the effect of the burning condition, right? So that's where the saves come in, right? And the cool part there is that since there's only 4 saves in the game, you can get really cool with like what kind of saves you could do. Good examples like polymorph. The polymorph spell is not targeting defense at all. It's not targeting. You're not trying to damage somebody with polymorph. It's just a save. So in DC20 as well, all spells, you roll a spell check on all spells, because I always have hated somebody casts slow, or let's just use polymorph. If a player in D&D casts polymorph They would say the words, I cast polymorph. They would roll no dice. The dungeon master behind the screen would roll a dice, say a number that's high or low or whatever, and then the thing happens. Like, I don't not that's just not fun. That's not fun to me. So when you cast polymorph in DC20, you make a spell check, and that is how powerful is that polymorph that you're coming in with, and they make a save, and then if you win, you beat them and they get polymorph. But the cool thing with polymorph is it's a might or charisma save is the one you're choosing, and you can choose either whichever one you want. So the creature, if it's this big, huge, massive creature, that'd be hard to polymorph, and they'd probably have a high might score. But if you're a very powerful lich type person with this charisma, your soul is so strong you can't be turned by magic, you would choose charisma. So you can get pretty interesting with the different combinations, or straight up clean, only this type of save.
Speaking of spells, DC20 has a system where a spell is expandable or upgradable, I guess. Could you give us an example of that? And then I have another question as a follow-up.
Okay. Expandable, as far as that goes, is to keep the example of Fireball, is the Fireball spell is not actually, first of all, it's not going to be broken. It's just the default Fireball is I shoot a projectile to this spot and it explodes in like a 2x2 small area. That's going to be a low level spell. 1 mana cost. I huck a fire thing and that's it. But if I want to pump mana into that, I can do more with it. I can increase the range of that fireball. The radius of the explosion might still be the same, but I pump 1 mana into it, and now I can really shoot that thing. I pump another mana into it, I add the burning condition. I pump another mana into it, I increase the radius, so now it's a wider area. I pump even more mana into it, like Firestorm level mana. I'm going wild, and I'm shooting 3 out at once, and they're all exploding. So you can actually have small spells evolve, like Pokemon, into bigger versions of spells that you're more familiar with.
And in some cases, what you've done is you've taken like spells that we would be familiar with in D&D, and there'd be several spells kind of encapsulated in a single
condensed
spell.
Condensed into one. Right.
So my follow-up question is, so in D&D there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of spells.
450.
Do you have any guesstimate as to how many spells the base book is going to have for DC20?
So if I had to, I'm going to say a number and then I'm going to change the number. So if D&D, let's say they had 400 spells, I would guess DC20 would have 100, right? Okay. Because there's probably going to be like, oh, there's so many fire spells. Let's just kind of combine those together. Oh, domination, mind control spells, dominate person, dominate beast, dominate monster. That's one spell in DC20. It's called dominate. And at the base level, you dominate the simplest thing, and then you pump more mana into it to dominate more things or 2 things or whatever. So that is going to instantly condense things way down. And I think there's a lot of benefits to a spellcaster fatigue of not having so many spells. Imagine a 20th level wizard with all of the different spells across all those spell slots, organized by spell slot level. So if you want to dominate, you'd have to see different spell instead of, here's my spells, they dominate. What do I want to do? I want to dominate. Here we go. And now I have this, and I can, how much mana do I want to cast? So instead of what spell do I want to cast, you can more easily find the spell you want to cast, then pour more mana into it. Now, so I would say 100, but then the extra extension of that is there actually leaves maybe room for more to be able to, because we have more efficient spells. Now we can make fortress spells and have like a whole list of like Leomund's tiny hut. Now, it's a mansion. Now, so you can.
Though there are some spells that are very unique. I'm wondering, are there any spells that you've looked at in the player's handbook, for example, and said that's not going to be a DC20 spell?
Silver barbs.
That's not in the player's handbook.
Oh, sure. So yeah, there's definitely been spells that I just feel like I have been like, honestly, Leomund's tiny hut I feel is a little broken, and I've never, it's rubs me the wrong way in certain things and can be used in some abusive situations, and I don't know, it cuts out layers of the game that I feel like maybe at higher levels, and if you put more mana into it, maybe you can add. So maybe there is a protective type of spell, like a hut type spell, and if you pump a whole bunch of mana into it, okay, sure, now you can have your Leomund's, but stuff like that, I think.
So will there be, like, for example, will there be a version of Force Cage in DC20, or Wall of Stone, or
Right,
Wall
right,
of
right, right.
Force. Those
Yeah,
kinds of different spells, are they going to also be there as well?
yeah. So I think now the wall of spells for sure. There's for sure gonna be wall of fire, wall of all those different types of things. And the cool part with that is I haven't made them yet, but there could be wall of elements where you could choose the element and then make a wall of it. Or I could separate them into 4 different spells: wall of fire, wall of air, wall of earth, wall of whatever. And then each of them have some unique things. You pump more mana into it, get more wall, right? And then there also could be things where pump more mana into it, turn wall into dome, and you can easily turn to where the wall spells, if you encapsulate it, you can make it a dome, right?
Now,
And that's
if it was something like a Wall of Stone, right,
Mhm.
and I was making a, I don't know, a bridge across a chasm or something, would that
Yeah.
still involve a spell check?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in general, that's a great question. So spell checks have 3 different versions, really. So I'm either making a spell check against your defense, like I'm attacking you like a firebolt, like I'm shooting something at your defense, right? So the spell check's targeting your defense. And then there's spell checks in that contested type way, like the polymorph we talked about, where I am casting my spell check versus your save, and let's see who wins, right? And then there's spells like healing, like magic missile, like fog cloud, like building a wall, that aren't either of those. You're not contesting against anybody. You're just trying to see how big of a spell you can cast. So specifically to answer your wall spell is you would have, when you cast a spell, if you ever spend mana on a spell, there's always a minimum result, right? You spent mana, you get something, right? So you'd have a minimum result of casting the spell of Wall of Earth, and you'd have, like, let's just say 5 spaces worth of wall that you could build, right? Maybe it's 10, depending on whatever. So let's just say 5 spaces worth of wall. You make a spell check. Let's say it's a DC 10 spell check. Every 5 you succeed that DC 10 spell check by gives you more wall, right?
Okay.
So if you cast Wall of Stone and you go for it and you roll real high, instead of 5 spaces, you might get 10 spaces, you might get 12, however the math of it works. But you could spell check it and then really build a wall in
So
time because of the big
every
numbers.
spell will have a spell check, and it'll have some kind of scaling effect if you roll well.
The only spells that won't are things that are irrelevant to any sort of hostility or like the light cantrip. I'm not going to make you make a spell check to see if you can turn on a flashlight, right?
Right.
Now, to also answer an earlier question, another cool thing that you can do with the spell system is the light cantrip is pretty simple, right? If I cast light on, this is a DC20 action tracker. That's funny. If I cast light on this, it's now glowing. Sure, I'm not going to make you make a spell check for that. Message, cantrip, super stupid simple things. There's not going to be spell checks for those. Those are things that are cantrip level stuff that just happen. But if I have light on this thing and I'm in combat, I'm going through, or I'm not in combat yet, I have light on this object, and then, oh, combat started, I have this light. The cool thing you can do with cantrips is pump cantrips with mana. Ooh, now making them a little bit more spell-like, a little bit more umph to them, still balanced because you're spending mana. And I could raise this up in the air and pump a mana into it and have it be a flashbang. This blinding
And
flash of
then
light
there's the
goes
spell
off.
check.
And then there's a spell check
Okay.
for that. Yes, exactly.
What can you tell us about the design of monsters in DC20? Obviously, we're ways off for any kind of book, but in terms
Right,
of,
right.
let's say you want to run a game of DC20, how do I design a
Yeah.
monster?
So it's been really cool. And honestly, once you learn the game, in general, well, first of all, in the bundle that is the DC20 Alpha, I have a full PDF of a monster building guide of like how to build a monster, and I've fully made that. I've had that ever since 0.4 to just be able to, like, hey, here's some tips on how to make monsters in a very easy way. Look for characters for inspiration, look for the conditions for inspiration, all that stuff, which I'll get into in a second. But so building monsters for DC20 is it was really bad because I was still playing D&D. I was playing Curse of Strahd. No spoilers for Curse of Strahd, I promise. I was playing Curse of Strahd while, like, I was in the middle of Curse of Strahd while all this DC20 stuff's happening. We've since finished, and I'm starting a new DC20 campaign, like I said. But while I was making monsters for Curse of Strahd, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish these were DC20 monsters. This is because it's just so simple and smooth and quick to make cool, epic, fun monsters in DC20, because honestly it has to do with the 4 action point system. Because it's 4 action points and you have 1 action economy, you just make cool stuff and the monster spends it. That's it. And if you want to have a legendary monster, give it more action points. You could legit give it more action points if you wanted to, or there's a whole separate monster-based system of legendary action points, which I think are the better solution to that. I just made this sonic bat creature literally today for a one-shot I'm running later tomorrow, and it's a sonic bat creature with a screech attack, and it was just so easy to make because I was like, all right, it has 4 action points, 2 legendary action points. There's the action economy for it. And I'm like, all right, what do I want this thing to do? All right, it has a claw, a bite, a this, and I just added a condition onto each of them, and everything you add on is just another action point, just like it is for players. So if a player wants to swing their sword, 1 action point. If they want to swing their sword and add like a shoving type effect to it, cool. I make an attack with my sword and I add a shove effect to it. So now that's 2 action points. And you do the same thing for monsters. So you can just think of conditions I like that I think are cool that fit this monster, or you can think of maneuvers that are in the game already for the player characters that I like to give to this monster. Or a cool sonic screech attack that I did where it's a sonic screech attack, and within 5 spaces it's 2 sonic damage, within 10 spaces it's 1 sonic damage, and they have a might saved, or they gain sonic vulnerability. Ooh, oh no, right? So I think it's just a cool, easy system to be able to like, oh, it's just action points. I make stuff, I tack on points worth of that. There we go. So it's been real fun.
So when determining the order of initiative in DC20, so the way it works is both sides, everyone rolls. You get the highest from one side versus the highest from the other side.
Ooh, no.
No, I've got it wrong.
Just a small little hint there. The Dungeon Master, the Game Master, does not roll initiative.
Sorry. It's the encounter DC. That's right. You got to beat. If anyone beats the encounter DC, then players move first. Last time I play tested, we just had the person with the highest bonus roll, and everyone else helped. So there's some reason that doesn't work, and if so, isn't that an issue?
Did y'all do that? Oh,
yeah. And so we blew away the encounter DC every time because you're adding a D8, a D6, and a whole bunch of D4s, right?
Right. So I thought you meant in our game that we.
No. This is in a playtest. You weren't there.
So, you should have invited. I could have just sat in. There's a couple of things with the initiative stuff. That's another big thing. This also ties into the question you said about like feedback from the community. Probably the biggest feedback that was it was weird for initiative. There was things that people loved about initiative and some things that were just people didn't like the most, right? They were like, I would just do it normal. It's just too intricate or too this and that. So I think in 0. Actually, this is going to be 0.7. There's so many things going in 0.6. I don't want this to also be part of it. But a little sneak peek here for Trent Monk is initiative is still going to be you going against that DC. It's all the players going against that DC. And you make an attack check, or if you want to get clever and creative, you can replace that attack check with a skill check if your Dungeon Master allows it, right? But you're trying to beat this thing. The help action and the dogpiling of the help action, right? That is going to be restricted in one of 2 ways. Either the most lame way, which is you can't, and just remove that from the game because it is something that is abusable by like, hey, we want this person to go first.
We figured that out real quick, and then we did it every combat. Never lost an encounter DC, not once.
My question is, well, I see, and because D8s, you're gonna be high enough to where even if they roll bad, you're gonna still get boosted by everybody else.
Well, it was 1 D8, then a D6, then a bunch of D4s, right? Because at least you get a D4, no matter how many.
So so the rule update for that is probably going to be, instead of like, especially the problem gets worse if you have parties of 6 or 7 or whatever. But the new version is probably going to say you can help somebody, but somebody can only have 1 help dice on an initiative check. So on initiative, you can have at most 1 help dice from your allies. So sure, you could treat the strategy then would be, all right, I'm going to help
half the group helps, half the group rolls.
Person, yeah. And then there might be an extra restriction added in. You have to be within close enough or whatever, which that might make it, depending on how you're coming in, that might make that a bit more tactical. But yeah, that's going to be the next attempt. Instead of everybody anything, it's going to be, okay, you get one, and let's see if that's still broken and how that feels, and then we can move towards, and that's what I also love about the playtest version of this is I have purposely, if we're not sure about something, I would rather get the full picture and then whittle it down to see where we're at, instead of like, oh no, let's not do that. And then we never even see, it never sees the light of day. So thank you for breaking it in its current state, and I will look forward to your feedback on if it's still broken in version 7.
All right. Let's see. Let's do a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go. But so DC20, are you going to have a set campaign world for that? Is it going to be unique, or is it going to be something that already exists?
This might be a whole video. Well, this already is multiple videos. The craziest thing that I was surprised by is when I announced DC20 and all the rules, and people are liking this, action points, attack roll, all these things. So many people want to know about the campaign setting. I was wildly blown away by how many people want to know about the campaign setting. I was like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's totally a campaign setting. I have been building this since my first homebrew campaign in D&D back in the day. That's a long story there, but I've had that, world building. We're all, lots of us are world builders, and so I've had all that. And I've had this idea for the creation of the world, how that happens, and how, like, where different ancestries come from, all of that, and like a cataclysmic event that turns and changes the world and leaves these lingering things in the world. So there is very much so a campaign setting in DC20. It's going to be the third Kickstarter after all the core rulebook, game book, Game Master's Guide, Monster Manual, and the campaign setting. And there'll be sneak peeks and teasers of the campaign setting through different live streams. I'm going to be live streaming some world building campaign prep stuff, and through my actual me playing in the game, there's going to be some stuff happen there because I'm going to be playing in that campaign setting. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff. That the sneak peek I can give here for Trent Monk is my philosophy of just from a mechanical standpoint of the world is. There's going to be tons of lore and tons of reason, tons of all this stuff. But the way I wanted to build the world is I wanted to build a world that was cool and modular to play in. So my big picture take on this is in the world campaign setting of DC20, there are going to be multiple different conflicts. I'm just calling them conflicts right now because there's problem areas, right? Things in the world that are really bad right here and have some sort of lingering magical this or that. There's rifts in the ground that shoot out from a central point from the cataclysm event, and these rifts and tears in the ground close and open at random spots. And so civilizations are built on either side, and these rifts, earthquakes, close them, and they stay shut for indiscriminate amounts of time and then reopen. And that's one thing of the many, like right now, 12 or so different conflicts in the world.
And the rift opens up and a glitter boy jumps out?
Hey! In your campaign? Yes, it does. But another example is like a section of the world. One of the conflicts is the creation of the Underdark, and from that is the entire water supply is poison. So like 25% of the world's water is poison. But if that doesn't speak to you, there's going to be sliders in every single one of these conflicts to slide it down to nothing or scale it up to almost the whole world. And that's your campaign. That's the campaign, is how do we solve this thing? And that's what the whole thing's about. The world's water supply is poisoned. You only have these crystals that you have to hold over the water to be able to drink it, or you know what I'm saying? And there's this cool little tweaks. But if you don't like that, then you slide that all the way down and be like, yes, the heroic adventurers of Triant came through here, and they solved this problem, and they've cured the waters, and it's all fine now. And you can choose to have things be a problem or not. So that's the goal.
All right, let's do one more question.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to make content for DC20, have you made any decisions about licensing?
Yeah. So too many decisions. All the making your own game is all. There's lots of big boy tasks you have to do, and legal talks and lawyers and all these other things. So and in the aftermath of the OGL and DC20 itself being a byproduct of that debacle, where I'm going to be releasing DC20 under the Orc license. That's all but set in stone right now. So yes. Which that means people can create content for it as long as they also if you're not aware, if you wanted to create content for DC20, you would just also create the content you make under the orc license, and then you would just point back to, hey, it's DC20, and then you would just link back to the DC20.com website, and you can make whatever you want. And I even take it one step further, and I'm trying to do it right, unlike some experiences we've had in the past. But I want to give those people that want to make content for DC20 affiliate links, just like I got you an affiliate link. All the YouTubers you can maybe think of, I've sent affiliate links to where if people create content for DC20 and then that creates eyes on DC20 and more people get it, I want those people to get a cut back from any sort of sales that they get, and all share a big part of that, to have a content creator community which creates great content for the community itself, and then has just a ton of content from great content creators across the board, all over the place. They're getting, kickbacks from all the stuff that they're making. They're able to make it. I'm not going to be on top of them trying to hold them down or anything. If anything, I'm not doing the opposite to try and help them out. So I will love when there's a YouTube channel created for DC20, about DC20, and they make content, and that's like their thing they do. That would be crazy moment. But yeah, that's how you can make content.
So on that note, for any of the viewers who do want to get their hands on the alpha playtest, my affiliate link is in the video description. And so that helps me out and helps out the game. And like Alan said, that if you support the alpha at this point, you get all the alphas right up to the Kickstarter, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, too, there's also some stuff in the alpha that's not going to, like, there's 15 classes. So the certain classes might not make it into the full game. So you'd have a little early access to it for when it eventually does.
All right. And with that, so I want to thank you for your time, Alan. And we'll just say goodbye to everyone. And,
thanks for having me, man. This is always a blast.
Yeah,
I appreciate you.
Glad to having you on. And we'll talk to you all later.